Good morning, Ann Whittington here with Reinventing Rural. And this morning on our WeChat or Women Entrepreneur Chat, we are really happy to have Mary Gant out of Bandon, Oregon, who, with her husband Trevor, owns Bandon Rain. And they make craft, unique ciders that are only available in the Pacific Northwest. And I've asked Mary to share with us this morning some obstacles that she faced starting a business out in a rural area and how she overcame them, and then anything else she would like to share about her business. So, Mary, I'm going to let you take it away and you can share your screen.
All right. Hello, everybody. So here, I'm going to start out. First thing, we started this also with my husband and his parents, who are full-time cranberry farmers. Part of why we started this company is the small farmer is, struggling right now, generally, all small farmers. And we were trying to think of more ways to use cranberries. So our signature cider is a cranberry cider, and we try to put cranberries in as many things as possible. So we started out, this is this old shed that was out on my husband's family's farm, and we remodeled it to first start to be a small little storage area and ferment some cider there. There's also another building right next to it, which you can see here. And this is where we make all the cider. And then this is also like storage, and we had like a mini little tap there. And one of the things being in a rural place versus a city, which things you really got to think about are things such as tires. And what I mean by that is we are constantly dealing with unpaved gravel and mud and dirt and rain, and it causes issues sometimes because we don't have nice pavement or anything like that. So it's always good to have a bunch of rock people on standby for when it rains too much. You always want to be a little creative. We took a bunch of pallets and built a little home for our forklift, just to protect it from the rain and the wind and everything. And here's an example of right here, this forklift got stuck. We had lots of rain, and it's not like we drove it off the road or anything weird like that. It literally just got stuck on the main road that we drive up and down. And part of our issue that we have adapted to is where we are in the farm. Big trucks can't turn around. So we can't have people, they can't come in and go right next to our facility and turn around and drop things off. They stay at the end of the road, the main road, and we go all the way out onto the main road and forklift everything off. And so that's always a challenge, but luckily where we live, it's like the trucks that come in have now been our friends, and they know where to turn around. And whenever we get a new driver, there's always some panic for them and us, because they're like, how? Because we're at a dead end road down like a gravel road. That's a dead end road. But now once you get to know the drivers, they got to be, your best friends, because they're the ones that are going to show up and make your life much easier. Another big thing we've had to deal with is it sounds weird, but a lot of getting rid of stuff, garbage, waste, recycling, all that stuff. It's not picked up that much out here. We constantly have to go to the dump and fill it up and, go out there. The dump's another 15 minutes away. It's super windy here, so we got the van, we shove stuff in. It's always a big thing. But like I said, so we're primarily a kegged product. We are not in packaging yet, which is partially related to, once again, most people in our size, when they can or bottle, they have a mobile bottler, which is in a giant truck, come to their facility, park, and they do it all in like one day. Once again, we can't fit a truck in our property to turn around. So we are strictly in kegs, and we have to ship them up to our distributors out in Portland and Eugene, and they send it all out throughout Oregon, and then bring them back. And then a big part of our day is washing them when they get back. So that's always fun. We use a lot of constantly washing kegs and cleaning them and running back and forth with them. Another advantage or for being in a rural place is there's lots of stuff you can take advantage of. For example, we started making a gorse cider. Gorse is an invasive plant out in Bandon. It's every farmer, everyone is always trying to get rid of it. As you look, these are spiky. This is not soft. This is super sharp. It's like a cactus or something, but the blossoms are edible. And back in Ireland, they make wine out of them, which is where they initially came from. And so we were like, well, how do we take advantage of everything around us besides the cranberries, besides the apples, like just take advantage of where we are. And we started making gorse cider, and we picked the blossoms. It's a arduous task. I send my husband out there with tons of gloves and like one bucket, and basically his job is to fill 1 5-gallon bucket a day for like 4 days, and it takes him all day a lot of times. And then we have to sort through and clean it, and then I ferment it down to make a gorse cider, where we combine apples and gorse blossoms. And this is one of our trees right out front of the cidery. All our cider is apple based, then we infuse a lot of cranberries into them. Some of this we do small batches of our own, and then we also get some delivered because another big issue out in the rural environment is storage. And generally, like for a while, we were thinking, where can we freeze a bunch of stuff? And the closest place I could find was Eugene, just 2.5 hours away. And there literally is no freezer space. It's weird because we're in a fishing place, you know, we're on the coast, lots of fishing. I talked to all these people, and they ship everything to Northern California and to Eugene to store it for the year. So there's always some, you know, finding freezer space and refrigeration is always an issue that we still struggle with. You know, like we really got to organize things and stuff like that. One of the things too, being out in a rural environment, we had a beaver problem for a while. And literally it took out a couple of our precious trees. We ended up now all our trees have this metal, almost fishing stuff all the way up it that deters the beavers. And it was funny because at one point it took out 2 of these littler trees, and I went outside and the tree was completely gone. This one, like imagine just the stump, and none of this tree was just gone. And I stood out there, and it was early in the morning, and I just stared at the stump, couldn't comprehend what I was looking at. Because I was just like, was there a tree here last night? You know, it's one of those things you just step out your door and you're like, no, what am I looking at? Like I literally went from my house and I walked, you know, in my boots and my robe all the way out to this tree and just stared at it. I'm like, what am I missing here? And I'm like, the beaver took the tree. And it was completely gone. This one he kept. I mean, he didn't take, he kept it here. The rest were all gone, which was kind of funny. Currently, we are in, these are big tanks. They're about 5 by 10 feet in our production facility. When we started out, we were fermenting in IBC totes, plastic totes, because cider and wine both can ferment. They don't need to be heated up the way beer does. It's a fermented fruit product. So we purposely ferment at 60-ish degrees, which is what the weather is here all the time. So we don't have to worry about much temperature control. And we started out in a bunch of like 275-gallon totes, and then eventually moved to these big tanks, which are about 1,000 gallons each, which is what we currently ferment in. And then that's just me cleaning one. Very exciting. Another fun or weird thing. So we built all our own fridge spaces because, like I said, we still couldn't build a freezer space. And we this is just looks like a standard shed, but the whole thing is insulated with about 5-inch foam. And then we have an air conditioner in there that is hacked with this thing called a CoolBot. It's pretty neat. Anyone can make their own fridge space in their closet if they have this thing. It's literally hacks the air conditioner to make it go around 40 degrees. And we've built numerous ones of them. This is the one, this is about 10 by 8 over at the farm. There's one right behind me. If you look, here's our task. Right behind that is underneath the stairs. We built a fridge for our tap room. And it's an air conditioner hooked up to this little thing. It's pretty cool. CoolBot invented them, I want to say maybe like 10 years ago. They've gotten better and better. And tons of people in our industry use them. It's a lifesaver because refrigeration is expensive and just being able to build one literally anywhere is pretty amazing. And then of course, if you see the cat numerous times, because the cats are always running around on our farm. This is the upstairs, our initial little tap room area that we had before we had this space. We've only started this space, we opened it up early June. So we've been selling cider in kegs throughout the state for since 2016. And then we just opened this up, ironically, early June in the middle of COVID. So with the tap room, there are lots of struggles as well as disadvantages and advantages to being in a rural environment. Meaning when you're building out stuff, a lot of times it takes forever to get anything. Shipping is a huge deal with everything, with making cider, with building out, because we're so far off I-5 and we're so far off any standard store or anything like that. We're constantly babysitting shipping and trying to get shipping in. And once again, you got to be best friends with all the truck drivers and all the people coming in so that you get stuff on a timely manner. One advantage to being out here, this was what our bar started out as. We got it from Oregon overseas. They're this giant lumber yard here. One of the only places I think in the country or the world that still does stuff like this at this size. They have a saw that's like the size of a house, to cut stuff like this. And then this, when you look here, these are our wainscoting as we're building it out. What that is old boom boards, which we use for cranberry harvest. Meaning each little piece of wood was a piece of something. Anywhere from the 60s to the 90s, they were used to corral cranberries during harvest. And now they use something called cranberry, or it's much lighter. It's like a foam type thing to do it. And so we took all these from the main farm and took them apart and put them all against the wall to it has a really beautiful aesthetic to the tap room. And this is kind of the final build out. If you see this giant piece of wood, is that piece of wood you saw earlier. It's like 350 years old. It's pretty cool. It was so big, we have about 3 more tables that were built from it. And this is also the kind of exterior of the tap room. As you see, because of COVID, we can't, right now, Coos County is still an extreme. It's been extreme for about over 2 months now, I think, about 7-8 weeks where we can't have any indoor seating. So we're adding little, trays and chairs and anything we can to build outdoor area, which initially we had no plans for. And now part of COVID, we have a couple tables over here, and then you can't really see the space here, but we're working on building a permanent outdoor area on the side of the building too, because even once COVID's over, there's still going to be a lot of residualness of people wanting to sit outside. So, but yeah, pretty much where we stand. Like I said, we've been making cider. My husband and I do it full time. His family, his parents help out when they can, but once again, they're still full-time farmers. So they're still handling all the cranberries and everything like that. Our next big task is moving our tanks and everything. We're building out so we can have, once again, back to the shipping issue. We can have cheaper shipping if we move into this space, which is in town, because the thing I've dealt with is commercial versus residential shipping also changes your cost. And so for example, we live about a quarter mile where we make the cider. We live there and make the cider. We live about a quarter mile from a hardware store. And if I have them shipped to the hardware store, it costs me like $50 less than having it shipped to my house, which is right there. And so what I do is I tell the shipper, hey, send it to the hardware store. And then I call the driver, because I know I have all their numbers now. And I call them up and say, hey, it's Mary. It says Hennick's. Can you just meet me at the house? He's like, yeah, no problem. So, or sometimes I've had them, if it's a small enough thing, I'll have them even ship somewhere else and just call them up and say, hey, it's easier to turn around at Hennick's, or I meet them at Hennick's, and which is the local store, and we turn around and get there. So I'd say, as I keep saying, in a rural place, one of the biggest issues for me has been shipping and dealing with getting stuff, as well as Another funny thing is, like I said, with the forklift and I have a dolly, and everything needs to be prepped with pneumatic tires or something that can handle gravel and just non-pavement and stuff like that. I have a really nice dolly that's weighted for like 800 pounds, has really good tires and a hook on it, and proper tools is a big thing. It was kind of funny when we first started. I had, we get a lot of stuff in buckets that are really the sealed lids, and I couldn't get them off, and I'd rip at them and rip at them, and I just, it's so hard to get out. Sound silly, but the bucket was on there, and I'd bring it like to my father-in-law, and he'd try to rip it off with his hand and like bash it in with a screwdriver. And then later my husband's like, well, why don't you just get the lid opener? I'm like, what do you mean a lid opener? And there's literally like $3 plastic thing that just, go click, 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 and opens it. I'm like, what? Why did no one tell me about this? So I'm constantly, any business ever, it's important to, seems like there's so many specific tools out there for everything and anything. And it's important to keep your eyes out for that and ask a lot of questions. I'm constantly asking everybody, how do you do this? How do you do this? How does this work? How does this work? Because when you're starting a new business, you're learning and trying to figure it all out, and everyone does something differently, and everyone's journey is different. And so you got to ask tons of questions and to see what people do and just go from there. And sometimes what they do will work for you and sometimes it won't, but asking lots of questions is super important for the learning process. So I guess
Mary,
that's it.
thank you so much. If you want to unshare your screen.
Yes.
I love that you did a slideshow for us today and we could actually see pictures of what you were talking about. That was fun and helpful. I heard so many great things. As far as some challenges, tires, nobody's ever talked about that. And that's a real challenge. What you're going to do with your garbage, just getting materials and supplies, and the transportation and trucking issues. But I also love that you talked about taking advantage of the resources that are in your area, and that you built your own refrigerator. So you can build a lot of what you need. And that's awesome. I want to open it up to people to let them ask questions. So you can either turn your mic on and ask Mary a question, or you can type it in the chat and Laura will ask it for you. So does anybody have any questions? Melinda, you usually have one.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how do you find the distribution aspects, getting your finished product? I know you said you send it out in the kegs to be bottled and stuff. How do you find the distribution aspects?
One thing that's helped us a lot, we have a distributor, Point Blank. They're a decent sized distributor. We just ship stacks of kegs up to them on a truck, like to Eugene and Portland. They helped a lot. It's one of those things that's been a little weird lately because of COVID. Portland was so shut down. We barely sent anything to them for a long time. But now that Portland's more opened up, we've been sending more up there. And then Eugene has been taking a lot of stuff and they pick it up. It is harder. Luckily with our distributor, they usually pay for the actual shipping to go to them. So we're not having to pay the extra cost, because obviously there's a difference between if you're just in Portland or Eugene and you're just throwing your kegs to your neighbor, versus the long drive of a bunch of kegs going from there. But once again, it's all good relationships with your shipping companies.
Oh, good.
Okay, I'm going to hop in with a question I have, and then we'll go to Brad. Someone wants to know, did you or your husband go through any certification for distilling license, and how?
I see it here. I'm reading. Yeah. Well, we're not distilling, we're fermenting. So that's a whole different licensing. We are technically a winery, according to the state, as well as on a federal level, because we ferment down fruit. But yeah, there is tons of licensing through the state, through federal, that we've had to go through. And that was also a big struggle. One thing that's kind of funny is there's no pamphlet that tells you the rules. So and every state's different. And so besides OLCC, which is Oregon Liquor, they have their own rules. And then the TDB, which is the federal level, they have their own rules. You pay taxes to both of them. They have their own rules. Like one weird thing with cider is if you can only carbonate it to a certain level, the sorts, you get a champagne tax, which is your tax of the roof. So everyone who makes cider is very careful about not over carbonating or you get heavily taxed. But it's only when straight cider, and these laws change all the time, as of a couple of years ago, straight cider meaning just apple where you don't put any other fruit in there, like is considered cider and you're not taxed as much, so you can carbonate it more. But the second I add the cranberries in with the apples, it's suddenly a fruit wine according to the TDB, and if I over carbonate it, my tax quadruples.
Wow.
So there's kind of a fun, and although there's millions of those silly little rules out there that nobody tells you until you like start doing it. And then eventually someone says that's wrong or not, and you know.
Yeah.
So you really got to be on, and they change. The laws change. One year you might be taxed a certain percent, the next year you're taxed a lot of weird taxes, as well as just weird rules. Like another rule that I actually really like in the state of Oregon, when you drop off alcohol, you have to be paid on the spot, or you're a bootlegger. So I like that because anytime I go to a bar anywhere and drop off a keg, they got to write me a check right then. You know, so that's actually a nice law that's for me in the state of Oregon.
Oh, that's
I didn't learn that until after I was telling people, hey, just invoice me when we first opened. And they're like, you can't do that. I'm like, what?
Okay, Brad, you have a question?
I had a question really around the bottling, because you had talked about right now you're shipping in kegs through a distributor, and you know the challenge of the bottling in a rural location is one you would need to bring in, you know, and I've seen these large trucks that come in and do the bottling run and everything, or make the investment to bottle yourself. Is there a third option to ship somewhere and does it have to be bottled on premise, or can it be bottled somewhere else?
You can, for example, there's bottling plants, and how that works is you give them your recipe, I guess you'd say, and they make it there and bottle it there. But I can't like ship my blended product fully carbonated, because remember, it's carbonated product.
Right.
Somewhere else, because there's pressure when you carbonate something, and everything's pressurized. So really, like I said, that is the third option. Once again, either you have a mobile bottler, or you have your own canning line, or someone else physically makes it on site at their place and bottles or cans it. Right. Another weird thing about our signature cranberry cider is completely unfiltered, which is unique. But if we were to can it, we'd still have to figure out there's more risk for re-fermentation in the can when it's unfiltered. So we'd have to really have lots of science figuring out the right way to pasteurize it. Because another thing, cider must be pasteurized when it's in the can if there's any residual sweetness in there, or it'll re-ferment in the can. In fact, I see with Michael Gibson also, he asked about cost and timeline and everything. And that's another thing, like with the TDB, I've heard on average it takes around 4 to 6 months once you send your application to TDB. That was when we first started about 5 years ago. But it was really, it's really a weird number, because I know some people that they were just in the right place in the right time, and they were able to speak to a TDB person in person, and they were approved, and like it took like 20 minutes for the person to go through the paperwork. It was nothing. And then other people took 9 months to get their liquor license. So that's another weird thing. It's just completely random how quickly, once you put in your paperwork. And I found dealing with permitting with every government anything, the timeline is so random, it makes no sense to me. And it's super frustrating, because you want to call them like, because it's literally 1-page document they have to just sign that's like super basic, and you want to be like, hey, what are you guys doing today? Like, why does this take so long? You know, what, are you busy? What's going on? And even like locally, sometimes as I get to know the people, you're like, man, it's not that busy of a place. Why is this taking so long? Like, just sign this thing, you know? And it's just kind of the timeline, timing things out with not just the government permits and stuff, but also because we're building out an outdoor area, and as well as a new production space, timeline of electricians, of plumbers, of all that stuff makes no sense to me. And it's that, as running a business, is super frustrating. And I know that's how everybody's going through it. You know, we're all in the same boat with that. But that's probably one of the big frustrations, and that'll be true anywhere you are, in a rural place, a city, and anywhere. The timeline of the people that are out of your control, it's super frustrating, doesn't make any sense. But
Mary,
that's how it is.
I have one more quick question. What is it that you all need to go to your next level that you may not have access to right now because of the fact you're in a rural community, or you may not have, you may be saying, if we only had this or that, or if we had one more this, or I could use some assistance or help here or there? What would that
Well,
be?
I kind of mentioned this a little bit, and I've told people this. If you had in this community a giant freezer, you would make tons of money, because there's so much fishing, there's so much fruit, there's so much everything. I don't want to run a freezer, but
Right.
I've told people, I'm like, hey, what are you doing? You want to start a business? You want to start, just open a giant freezer. Storage is a huge issue for us because we're constantly paying for shipping. That's expensive because we're so in the middle of nowhere,
Right.
and because we can't freeze anything. We have our refrigeration stuff, but that only keeps stuff so long.
Right.
If there was some magical world where we had a bunch of freezers and we could rent freezer space, you know, half hour away, that would be amazing.
So it's an infrastructure thing, and it's kind of a small infrastructure thing, but in rural, and that's in a lot of cases for rural, it's, you know, gravel roads, no place for the truck to turn around, some freezer space. It's all these little steps that many times urban businesses don't struggle or are challenged with that. Plus, most urban businesses don't have beaver problems. Okay, so
Yeah.
you have other challenges too. But all right, well, thank you very much.
And I see someone, Mike Gibson asked again about marketing and stuff. I mean, social media is a big thing locally. Like, we'll report a little thing and be like, say, hey, there's some food truck today, or blah, blah, blah. And people see it and they do it. We also, what helped pre-COVID time were festivals. We did a lot of festivals throughout the state. And I feel like that helped. I always was surprised with some of the other places out here that we got to know that they didn't do festivals nearly as much as we did. And I really think that helped us grow because it starts getting your name out there.
Right.
I think, back when festivals were around, that really helped. And then, like I said, right now it's all about the social media.
And I would encourage all of you to go to their website also, Band and Rain. I took a look at it this morning, and it's a really nice website. Your tap room is gorgeous. I just love it. I love all the wood, and it's really cool looking. So I would encourage everybody, take a look at their website and maybe get down to Bandon sometime and try some of their cider. Do I have time for one more quick question? Does anybody have another question?
If we can't get to Bandon, where can we get this in Eugene or Portland?
We have it just Point Blank is our distributor. They do like Freem, and they do a lot of big names. So we're one of their smaller guys there. They some of the best places, like in Eugene, you know, have ever heard of Ciderlicious? It's a food cart out. He's been really supportive of us. He has our stuff a lot. Cold Fire Brewing taps our stuff a lot. Gateway Grill. And then in Portland, it's hard for me to say in Portland just because they've been so shut down. I'm not sure where we are right now. That's all our distributor. And we're sending out a lot of stuff. And I know there's a lot of places in Beaverton, any growler fill place, growler guys. We're moving around rotation. I always tell people the best thing you could do is go to your favorite watering hole and tell them you like Band and Rain, and they'll be like, well, how do I get Band and Rain? And say Point Blank Distribution. If you don't remember Point Blank, just say those guys who distribute Freem and Boneyard, they have Band and Rain. And that helps us a lot to get us on draft places. But like I said, with COVID, everything's been so, I don't know what's even open anymore. But I do know, like I said, in Eugene, Ciderlicious and Gateway Grill and Cold Fire have been really supportive of us. And we got a really good business in Roseburg. A lot of the breweries there were on tap because, you know, we're not competition for a brewery. So we become really good friends with all the breweries around here. And so one of the best places to find our cider generally is at your local brewery.
Great question, Brad. Thank you, Mary. Mary, just thank you so much for taking time today out of your busy day and for doing that great presentation so we could see pictures. And I love the beaver story too. So we really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining today. We're going to sign off. It's about 10:30.
Of course, thank you.
Bye, thanks.